Okay. All right. This is The Grass is Greener on WXRW 104.1 FM in Milwaukee. I am the host of the program, Gary Grass. With me is my co-host, Babette Gruneau.
Hi, and tonight for our guest we have Chris Fons. He has been a longtime teacher at River West High School, and he's here to talk to us today about the school board. So I'm going to let him do any other...
Self-introduction?
Yes.
All right. Let's start. Hey,
Sure,
he's been on the show before, friend of the show. Glad to have you back. Always nice to talk with you.
Thank you. I was a Milwaukee public school teacher since 2000, and I taught at Riverside for 20 years in social studies. And then at my last few years within the district, I worked for First Nation Studies. And First Nation Studies works with Native students throughout the district and high schools. There were two of us teachers within the department. There were other people in the department who dealt with other elementary and middle school, but we two teachers dealt with all of the high school students within Milwaukee Public Schools. So I went from high school to high school. So I have a kind of a view, pretty good view of how a school can succeed and decline a little. Riverside has had some issues, and we can get into that. And I have two children in Milwaukee Public Schools now. Both of them. One is at the Southside Ronald Reagan High School, and she's a ninth grader. And then my youngest is still at Escuela Fraternity here, two-way bilingual school. She's in fifth grade. She'll be going on to Golden My Ear next year.
Golden My Ear and Ronald Reagan.
They come up with these schools.
We're starting out with a colonial bang here.
Yeah, it's like
And I'm running for school board, so I'm unopposed. And there's an interesting article today in Urban Milwaukee. Bruce Murphy, I don't know if you know him, but any opportunity to bash Milwaukee Public Schools is taken, and it's really a system that's under a serious threat. And it's part of the reason that I'm running to try to help defend this public institution, and we can get into this also, if depending on how wide-ranging we want the discussion to go.
Well, if you're really unopposed, then I assume you're probably going to come in first.
You never know. There's always the write-in candidate.
Well, they have to register, otherwise the write-ins don't get counted.
Is that the case in Wisconsin?
That is the case. Yes, unless you let them know to count your name, they just throw out all the write-ins. So,
it is highly likely I will be the next representative for the 5th District in the east side of Milwaukee. The district goes, just FYI, from the lake to the highway, from Capitol Drive to just about downtown, just like near Red Arrow Park.
So we're sitting in it right now.
I was just
you were in the belly of the beast, the belly of the beast, as they say.
Yeah, I just as a housekeeping measure, if you do find out that you do have an opponent, please let us know, because FCC rules require us to invite that person on.
So no one can be on the ballot at this point. Right. The deadline has
passed.
Yes, has passed. So
okay. All right.
No one will be on the ballot against me.
All right. So congratulations. Now let's talk about the school board. Why should anyone care about the school board elections?
Well, it's really interesting because if there is one thing that you could affect when it comes to budgets, the Milwaukee Public Schools budget is over $1 billion. I think it's $1.3 billion. I could be off of there, but it's more or less that. It's democratically controlled. Barely, given I'm unopposed, and two of the other people that are running are unopposed. But it is democratically controlled in the sense of we are elected representatives, and we're supposed to be representing the people of our districts. And then There's a citywide seat also, so it's broken up into 8 districts and then one citywide seat. So the people, it's shocking how disengaged we are. And again, we can get into this. These public institutions have really been attacked and maligned and privatized and underfunded, and so these kinds of institutions like school boards are really good representations of the times and ways. Um, Liberal reformers many years ago, particularly in the late 1800s, democratized many of our institutions, trying to create more of a social democracy. And one of the things was more elections. And we have a lot of elections in this country, by the way, on many different levels because of the development of our federal system. Um, and we're a victim of our success in some ways because we have expanded universal public education to everybody in the country. We funded these institutions relatively well, particularly, by the way, in the cities. And then once we gained, a modicum of social democracy in this country, liberals in many ways got fat and lazy and moved towards the market much more. And neoliberalism, as it's a weird word these days. I don't know if it's that well defined, but it abandoned many of the urban centers of industrial United States. And then these places, like in Milwaukee, by the way, is at the center of the privatization and voucherization of public education. Places like Milwaukee, Detroit, and Buffalo, New York,
Most of
Cleveland,
the big
Ohio, and
cities, yeah.
Columbus, the whole industrial belt, right? All of these cities were abandoned. Capital flight and then middle class social, a flight occurred, leaving them in a very precarious position with highly racialized poverty, which has allowed for this new populism to come to power. And now we're seeing, today, one of the most um, uh, um, substantial attacks on the social welfare state that we've seen in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't think it will hold. However, the current regime, the current administration is taking the position that the executive branch can withhold any monies that they feel they don't like, right? So
Yeah.
obviously they go after Medicaid and programs for the poor,
School lunch
or
programs.
yeah, people. Well, what they do and what Trump is very good at is figuring out who the most unpopular group is within his coalition, and trying to make a stink and keeping people off of their or on their toes or off of their toes, however, whatever they want to go, wherever we want to go with that metaphor. But and just seeing what sticks, and then he'll move on because he's an attention seeker. But at the same time, he fundamentally understands what the divides are within our society and how to exploit them to the detriment of the most vulnerable among us, right? So the federal government has become a place where, since the 1930s, people could go to not starve to death, right?
Yeah.
To not have a home, to get a
Yeah.
menial, like a minor access to healthcare and things like that. And those things have expanded since the 1930s. And we've seen it since, I moved to Milwaukee in the 1980s, and we saw, with the late 1970s, early 80s, the reversal or the beginning of the ideological reversal of the commitment to that New Deal order. And that New Deal order, they're trying to unravel. It's still not dead. last year, at the end of last year, there was an expansion of Social Security, and there was a a expansion of the welfare state, and it went oddly unnoticed. But we have this another group of the ruling class at this point who really does want to unravel much of. I mean, Trump talks about the late 1800s and the early 20th century when the United States had, and his Treasury Secretary gives a little speech about this, who says when we had no income tax and the tariff was the revenue engine of the federal of the state.
And so he wants to take us all the way back.
Well, if we unpack that in about 5 minutes, we could figure out how absurd that is, given what kind of society we live in now with things like airplanes, right? It's kind of amusing that in his simple mind. I mean, I think he really thinks we could go back to those times.
I mean, I'm watching a TV show now that's set in 1900, and it's like everything is just so ugly and brutal, and it's like everything is so miserable. And it's like, why would anyone want to go back to anything like that?
Well, and let's also remember what came out of those times. Well, the tariff is a tool of the nation state to wage economic war, right?
Well,
and the wars that came out of the late 19th century was part of that whole economic imperial wars. And it ended up in World War I and World War II, which is an extension of World War.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, the way I tend to look at tariffs, I mean, Lincoln was a big proponent of tariffs. Tariffs are great for a country that is, has a fledgling industry that it needs to protect from foreign competition, and so you pass a law to punish people that use foreign inputs so that you can promote your local inputs, right? And that's something that's a good economic policy if you are a country that has a weak economy that needs protection for more powerful rivals outside of your country that are more economically powerful than you are. Then you wouldn't have a chance if you had to compete with them directly. So tariffs are a perfect tool for a country who is an economic, not an alpha, but a beta or a gamma or a delta dog that's used to being kicked in the belly and always loses at everything. And so you look at the way, tariffs against China to try to protect U.S. from the overwhelming power of the Chinese economy actually might make a little bit of sense because they're kicking our ass all over the place. But I mean, normally you'd want free trade, and that was the big thing coming out of the 80s and 90s. Like everything has to be free trade. We have to have free trade with everything because it's like we want to be able to bust into all the other markets around the world and break down their tariff barriers and break down their protectionism so that we can compete one-to-one because we're more powerful than they are. And now we're back.
Now we are a declining empire, and we're starting to feel it.
Yeah, we're weak. Although wanting to do tariffs against the smaller countries is just really stupid. I mean, it's just
I'll quibble with that in some ways. All
right, that's fair.
The United States knew what they were doing when. Starting in the 1970s, they uncoupled from the system that they had created, and a part of the ruling class of the people in this country said we can set up shop anywhere now, and part of that was technology, but part of it was ideological, right? The British Empire was for free trade, like you guys said. Because they could bust into any market and sell whatever they want and destroy other industries. We really did come to a point where there was an international bourgeoisie, right? A group of people who really did know that they could move production here, and they made agreements that would benefit that international bourgeoisie. And China eventually was one of the major beneficiaries of that whole system. And the Democrats' alignment with that whole system and what I would call the country club Republicans, who were the same part of that coalition of forces. They left an opening for the new populists, right? Starting with people like George Wallace and eventually Reagan, and now Trump, right? Who rightly said that the people who were running this country, both within the Democratic Party and within the Republican Party, have sold you out, right? And we saw it in Milwaukee, we saw it in Detroit, we saw it in Paterson, New Jersey, and we can go on and on and on, right? And then to use the racial stuff that they do and gender stuff and all of the culture war stuff, it's a very powerful message that is going to be hard to unwind because of the alignment of people like Jimmy Carter, right, who we're all saying is such the great savior, right? At this point, when he died as 100 years old, I heard an old saw that somebody said he should have went right to ex-president. Because he was much better as ex-president than president. He just should have went right to that.
He should have skipped the second half of his term and just kept the first half of his term.
but he was no lover of labor and human rights. I think it was one of the great revisionist stories of all time, is the story of Jimmy Carter. However, I digress on the larger story of how the Democratic Party left this opening because they abandoned labor and they abandoned any kind of internationalism, right? For bourgeois internationalism, for the alignment of forces all around the world, which just let capital become extremely mobile and was able to move a factory from Cleveland to Mexico to Thailand to Brazil.
You have a factory in Cleveland, and you have a second one in Mexico, and a third one in Vietnam or wherever, and you can use the competition between your own factories to suppress labor costs in one place, because they're all redundant. You can always just ship to a different country, so there's
you can always close the older one, which was in Cleveland.
Correct.
Right. So
they're so inefficient. Those workers are so inefficient.
Right. They're more efficient because they've got higher productivity value, because they've got better equipment and they've got better training. But when you talk about these free trade things, you're basically talking about freedom of the United States to bring in stuff from Ford Motor Company in Mexico instead of Ford Motor Company in the United States, right? It's all our own stuff going back and forth, and so much of that whole thing was so mythologized, like it's some big nationalistic thing, when what you're really seeing is our subsidiaries of our own countries, our own companies abroad.
What I want to ask is, how does this relate to the school board?
School board, got to get back to that.
I was hoping somebody would do it. Well, because what happened in by the way, Milwaukee had one of the first. So Milton Friedman, who is one of the gurus of all of this discussion that we're having right now, invented this idea of school vouchers, and Milwaukee became the first city in the country to have a major voucher scheme. I call it a scheme.
It's a scheme,
and what it does is it allows you, as if you were and you were low income, by the way, if you were low income and you lived in Milwaukee, you could take some money and apply it to a private school. And then you could go to that private school and you didn't have to go to your local public school. So they put it in this terms of choice, right? The libertarians love this kind of language of, I now have a choice. And the spokesperson, by the way, was
the same thing. It's the same thing as changing Social Security to independent retirement accounts, right? It's the same deal. Give people the choice. Do not have a big collective efficient program to serve everybody. Instead, just give everyone the money and let the market steal it all.
Right. So Polly Williams, by the way, was put forward as the spokesperson for this. She was a state representative for this area,
yeah,
and that was done on purpose. By the way, they wanted to have an African American woman saying, "Look at these terrible schools. Look at how these." They call them government schools, by the way. They said she didn't, but other people did. Look at how these government schools are terrible, and you should be able to have a choice. And they've expanded this all across the country. And Republican, Democrat, the New Orleans, when the whole system was destroyed by Katrina,
oh yeah,
the Obama administration imposed a voucher scheme there, charter schemes there. We just had a massive expansion of vouchers by the Democratic governor in the state of Wisconsin. Right, these types of schemes have been very much, I wouldn't say very much, but many people have embraced them who were traditional liberals within the Democratic Party.
They made it a really point to go after progressives and have progressives lead the charge on this.
I'll go back to the larger discussion that we're having about the abandonment of the cities, right? They're neoliberals, right? They're not pro-labor. They're comfortable. They're professional managerial class. They are people who can say, "Oh yeah, I want to send my kid to a better school." By the way, they live in Whitefish Bay, or they live in Fox Point, or where there's no voucher systems at all, because they know that it's more efficient to send their kids all to the local school where all of the kids' parents were college educated.
Yeah.
And in the city, where we have radically racialized poverty, a low-wage regime. By the way, it's expensive to rent in Milwaukee. It's not an easy place to live. Right. It's a low-wage place. The liberal elites never supported things like family leave or any kinds of minimum wage, raising the minimum wage, anything like that. They still don't. This is a low wage model here in Milwaukee, and people continue to leave because there's high violence. And then they say there's bad schools, right? So it's, the schools are so bad in Milwaukee and Cleveland. Can you believe how bad they are? And what they mean by that is there's a lot of Black poor people there. That's what it means when you say that the school is bad. You don't want to send your kids to a place where there's a lot of.
Well, it's largely that. There are objective measures that you can look at. I don't know how they're doing on the objective measures, but they make a big point of calculating.
Why are the objective measures better at Whitefish Bay and at Nicolet than they are at River West School?
Because a lot more money goes into the systems.
Well. Yeah. We know why. There's been massive underdevelopment of this area, as we were talking about, and white and upper middle class people are much more mobile. They can leave and go live anywhere they want. Can poor people in Milwaukee or Cleveland or Patterson, New Jersey, move to Fox Point?
No.
Right.
They moved to Savannah or somewhere, but they can't move to Fox Point.
Point being, though, the schools. I've been in the system for 25 years. My kids go to these schools. My kids are doing fine. Why? Because both of their parents are college educated. There's incredible, vibrant discussions at home all the time. We're encouraging them to read books all the time. They're not living in the chaos. Why? Because they have a roof over their head. They have health care. They go on vacations. They have all of these things.
Yeah, the schools get blamed for every problem in society that walks into the school that the schools didn't create.
Well, the neoliberals also want to blame teachers. They want to say they're not doing the job. They're not fixing these poor kids. Well, how the hell are we going to fix them, right? All of a sudden, I was a teacher in the school. I have a class for 45 minutes for an hour.
It's not the teachers that screwed them up.
To fix this.
It's not the teachers that screwed them up. It's you politicians that took away all their money, and now you're going to blame the teachers.
So that's why we see a full-throated attack on the social welfare state, right? Because this division of people, and in our country with racial, in most countries there is some sort of ethnic or racial angle. it easily divides people, and people say, yeah, well, we can't keep throwing good money after bad.
Yeah, oh, I've heard that so much.
Well, then stop
Yeah,
doing it
yeah.
at the Pentagon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You can't just throw money at a problem. Money never solves problems. It's like I don't know. I mean, I got a bunch of money a little while back, and it solved most of my problems.
That's right.
It's
Problem
amazing.
with my teeth, the problem with my back, the
Oh,
problem with my
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, I mean it's it. You don't think money fixes things? Give me your money.
that's right. And then they
I
don't want it.
I can find ways to use it. Go ahead. Just give it to me. I'll do a better job with it. If you don't think it works, then you're just don't know how to use it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm running on a program of fully funding public schools, recruiting parents, because there's a lot of nice talk about integration of schools, but there's a lot of nice liberal people in River West who are not sending their kids to public schools, and they're taking a voucher. We have to recruit staff. I moved here to Milwaukee and into this house on Burleigh Street so that I could walk to school where I worked at Riverside High School. And we have to recruit administrators who are committed to urban education, right? We people who are not just here to get us a paycheck and drive to West Bend or to Elmbrook. I'm sorry, there has to be some sort of ideological commitment now, because we have created this system. So we cannot just be parasitic on the system.
Does Milwaukee actually get enough for its schools? I mean, I
I'm
thought I
gonna
had heard that Milwaukee did not get its full amount. I mean, that Milwaukee pays out more to the state than it gets back
Oh yeah.
for the schools.
Right. So historically, the urban schools after World War II started getting more and more money. They started to organize also. By the way, the teachers' unions and stuff were most powerful in the urban areas, and urban school districts were fairly well funded. With deindustrialization and the movement to the suburbs, money follows people, right? Or
Right.
the power, money follows power, right? And we had a shift with suburbanization to what we call the northern suburbs, the western suburbs. That's usually how the development happened
Yeah.
in urban America,
Well,
right?
saw a flight from the
Yeah,
city to the outlying parts of the county, and you saw a
correct,
flight from the county into the next counties. Right?
correct.
You saw both patterns.
Right. And now we had pretty decent funding. And then when the bottom dropped out in the 1970s and 1980s, 90s, there was real defunding of, and you can look at the schools in places like Milwaukee and Cleveland and other places, and you saw dilapidated buildings and things like that. Now there's been somewhat of a revival, like in Milwaukee. We've passed two referenda in the last 8 years that gave substantial hundreds of millions of dollars to the schools. And the overall, the country did get richer, and we spend a lot of money on education in the United States. The problem is we have highly racialized poverty, particularly in the cities. The rural areas also. So it's different. So it's different. It's not as severe. There's the massive inequality, but they don't tend to have as dire of a situation as many of the urban areas do. And then we spend a lot of money in the areas where people have two parents who are college educated, right? The highest paid teachers in this area are at Nicolay, right? And in Madison, it's going to be in
Yep.
Shorewood Hills. It's in these suburbs now. With our new referendum, we're almost caught up, because many of the teachers are getting what we call step and lane raises, and that means people are getting a regular raise. And if you get a regular raise, people will stick in that job.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that is a way that, and by the way, there's a huge teacher shortage now. And if you want to keep teachers, that's one thing that the district actually tries to attract people with, is saying, look, if you come here, you're guaranteed to have a pension, you're going to have a good health care benefit, and you're going to have a step and a lane increase for your job, and you can retire when you're 55.
And summer's off.
That's a little weird, that summer's off thing, but yes, they have a 191-day schedule, and there are a lot of holidays and things like that. But teachers do take a lot of work home.
That's true. Yeah.
And most teachers do some sort of work in the summer, either professional development or some other job. Now, again, some other job they're doing because they want to. So I'm not saying they have to. But most teachers need a recharge, and probably most workers do. But it's not the.
You're seasonal labor, like a cherry picker.
Yeah.
Different season.
Yeah. Go up to Door County and pick cherries for a few months, and come back down and teach in the schools.
Right. So we have a lot of challenges in Milwaukee Public Schools because of highly racialized poverty. We have a declining population demographically. We have a voucher system in charter schools that now represent about half of all of the students. So we have a large special ed population because those schools can kick them out. And we have a lot of new immigrant kids, and then we have a lot of African-American people who are the lowest income people in the urban areas.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's when the demographics change, the income base isn't there, so the tax base isn't there, so the schools get defunded that way.
Right.
They've had people up in Madison who just hate Milwaukee, who have been playing with the formula so that the Milwaukee gets less back just across the board because they hate Milwaukee.
Right.
And
all the urbans that happens to, by the way.
Yeah. No, it's. I'm not saying it's a unique feature here. It's
right.
It's all the stuff that we see here is replicated over and over in city after city after city, right? And it's like we have to look at what happens in other cities because that stuff can happen here, and they have to look over here to see what might happen to them.
Yeah, the most egregious is within the special ed funding. Special ed funding under a voucher gets reimbursed up to 90%, and then in Milwaukee we get about 27%. So
ouch.
And we have, the overwhelming. Our percentage of special ed kids is really, really high because of historic reasons. Lead paint and generational poverty and et cetera, et cetera.
The whole lead thing is a whole nother issue. No, I mean, it's one more example of all the stuff that's not created by the schools coming into the school system, and the school system has to deal with it. I mean, it's nice to have the school system because someone has to deal with all this stuff. I mean, if every problem in society, it has to get solved either by teachers or cops, and I'd rather have teachers solving most of the problems.
Well, it does say something when the Republican legislatures think that the one thing that we need more of in Milwaukee Public Schools is more police in the classrooms. I mean, they passed a law and they blackmailed the city, county executive and mayor. They said the only way that we will allow you, by the way, to raise any kind of revenue for the larger budget is if you put cops in the schools.
So that they find money for.
Yes. It's really something to think that would create a more conducive environment for learning. Oh yeah, you know what? I'm really gonna study math. You know why? Because that cop's gonna kick the shit out of me if he doesn't do my math homework. I mean, I'm laughing because it's so sick, right? It's really and it's cynical. It's cynical.
Well, I mean, you've got they're there in case there's like a school shooting. They can be like the Uvalde cops and
Well,
hanging
look,
out outside.
my kids have had those experiences, but you know where the guns and stuff are? They're out in the streets around the schools, right? They're not. There's been I don't think there's been any school shootings inside
Yeah,
schools in Milwaukee.
they need
I don't
to
know
they
of any.
need to redeploy the cops to the perimeter.
Well, well, but that's the thing. They don't seem to be able to keep the peace in the larger community, and then they're going to come in and beat up on the kids in
Yeah,
the school. And this is between, well, it's not, can't be between you and me because this is on radio. I've talked to principals, I talked to everybody, and they say, look, the cops are rough. They're rough on the kids. We're soft on them compared to the cops. Yeah, you can't just beat the shit out of people and say you're going to be a better citizen.
Yeah.
But by the way, radio. I don't know if you can say the short word, but
Oh, sorry.
well, someone's gonna have to go back into this tape and like edit that out. But yeah, no.
I'd assume somebody's listening to the show.
Yeah, well, the only one listening is the FCC, just in case we have to use a dirty word.
It's some Trump appointee. I got them.
Yeah, yeah, FUS FCC, right? No, I think that's a wrong acronym, right? It's just FCC, not FU. Anyway, but I that's. It is crazy, but I mean, it's like they manipulated the law so that cops would have a stronger union. So they got to put them in the school.
They're the only union those guys like is the police and some construction unions.
Yeah,
And they're on the teat too, and they endorse these conservative politicians. A lot of them are in the bag with them socially also.
So what more do we need to know about the schools? What other things are you thinking of? Is it immigration issues, something? I mean, I would think that will be an issue under this new administration.
Well,
I mean, will kids be taken out of the schools?
Before I get into that, Jerry Brown, I don't know if you remember, but
yeah.
After he was governor, or before he was governor, he did a little stint as the mayor of Oakland.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, just to be clear, I think Jerry Brown had a career where he was governor, and then he left for like 20 years and became governor again.
That's right. That's what it was. And I was trying to think of the whole history of it. And by the way, I saw him at the headwaters up in Northern California. He gave one of the best political speeches I've ever seen. It was an environmental speech. Jello Biafra was close to me, and he was sneering the time. But anyway, I'm name dropping.
Go Jello. I like Jello.
He's a big hit on River West Radio. Jello. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Jerry Brown, when he was mayor of Oakland, he would have these press conferences and be like, Jerry, what's the biggest thing that you need in Oakland? And he said, people. And he's right. We have an out-migration, right, in the upper Midwest. Well, why do out-migrations happen? Now, we are having demographic issues generally because humans are giving up hope.
Yeah. No. It's turning into Handmaid's Tale because no one has children anymore.
Now, it's more complicated than that, meaning women's education, and that's what it comes down to, actually. It's a positive thing in a lot of ways. But point being, we have fewer people in many parts of the country. And people are moving to areas as they get older where there's warmer weather, there's lower taxes, et cetera, right? So we do have a demographic problem within these upper Midwest and industrial cities, these older towns. And rural areas too, by the way.
And the only thing that can save them, like Springfield, Ohio, is to bring in the Haitians. They'll fix it.
Well, so that's the thing. So the way that you can do it is you can try to increase populations, and like no one has been able to do this, by the way, except for the Israelis. So you have to be a fanatical, a fanatical ideal, and I mean this truly, to have an ideological commitment to some sort of future that is almost messianic, right? And the Israelis fit that bill, right? So they're in the Western world. They're some of the only populations that are going up. Populations are going down almost everywhere, except for some parts of Africa, some parts of Asia, but most parts of the world now, because of universal education and things like that for girls and women, right? And because of higher standards of living, populations are going down. So what do we do, right? You can either try to pay people off. The French tried to do that; it didn't really work, right? You have some ideological commitment, or you bring in new immigrants, right?
Yeah. I mean, the conservatives are all talking right now about increasing the white birth rate, right?
That's their messianic vision. It's the Mormon solution.
Oh God, yeah. Oh,
but again, I'm laughing, but it's true. It's true.
I was in love with a woman who escaped from the Mormon church. By the way, she hates them and I hate them. So okay, but no, go ahead.
I was gonna say that. Now I've totally forgot what I was gonna say. Yeah, no, I just.
Well, we were talking about how you can
bring in immigrants,
increase populations, right? Yeah. And it has to be ideological or immigration.
Yeah.
But you get the MAGA folks who say, but they're shoving us out, and it's like,
who's us?
Them, the MAGA folks. They see themselves, mainly white Americans, being. They feel shoved aside. Maybe I won't say shoved out.
So this is okay. So then I'm going to go into something a little even more controversial.
Replacement theory.
No one's listening now at all. But this is the problem with identity politics. Also, right? We've all have kind of accepted a lot of these categories of race, right, and identity. And then, my dad, I remember saying, he goes, they're going to, I said, Dad, who are you talking about there? Because we're Polish and in the south side of Milwaukee, we were hated just as badly as maybe the Italians or the Irish. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that was only 100 years ago, right?
Every incoming group ends up being the ones hated.
Right.
Whether it's the Polish,
Blazing Saddles best describe that phenomena.
Yeah, I mean, Irish weren't even white,
Yeah, well,
they weren't thought
yes and no. Yes and no. They weren't treated as badly as African Americans. African Americans have always had the worst deal of the whole crew.
Yeah. Well,
fundamentally different project.
I mean, maybe when you talk about the Black Irish, but I mean, for most of the Irish, they weren't black; they just weren't white.
Sure, but that color difference.
Like Italians weren't white either, right?
Sure. The revival of the Klan in the early 20th century had mostly to do with their hatreds of papists and Jews, right? Catholics and Jewish people, because of the new immigrants that had come in the late 19th century, who were predominantly from Eastern and Southern Europe. And they were seen as subhuman because the Northern WASPs were the dominant culture. Mm-hmm. And we can go back to another major wave of immigration in the 1840s and the 1850s with the Germans and the Irish, and that helped actually bring the Civil War about because of the disintegration of the Whig Party. So when we have these, this is very nativism is as American as apple pie. It always has been a part of our national discussion, and it's really caused a lot of cleavages within our society.
Yeah. Well, when Wisconsin was granted statehood, it was on the condition that we allowed non-citizens to vote in our elections, because they were only confident that we would remain a free state if the Norwegians and the Germans were allowed to vote in our elections. Right?
Right.
They were part of the bulwark to make sure that we would enter as a free state, someone else would enter as a slave state, and so the rule was, you have to let these people vote, and they wound up with rules that said something like, well, you have to sign an affidavit that says you intend to eventually become an American, right? But then you get to vote in our elections, and that was like, and that's federal elections, right? That's for like U.S. Senate and stuff like that.
Right.
And that was the law. We had to let immigrants vote in our elections. And now look where we've gone from that. I mean, all that disappeared in the subsequent decades, and now it's all gone.
Well, but I'll challenge that a little. With the Immigration Act of 1965, we became much more non-discriminatory than we had been from the 1920s up into the 1960s. And it was as a result of the civil rights movement who tried to make our laws non-discriminatory. Now, it wasn't completely egalitarian. However, as a result of that 1965 act, the new immigrants that came in were overwhelmingly from Latin America and from Asia. So we've had a new influx, and that's where much of the animus has come out, which created Trumpism, in a lot of ways, because of all of the, in particular, Latinos who came into the country as a result of the 1965 Act.
Yeah, it doesn't allow them to vote though. Say it
again.
Didn't allow them to vote though, right? That's something that's a part of our sort of forgotten legacy, right? The assumption.
No, but everybody can
like
vote. Everybody can vote who's a citizen.
Yeah, but I mean, previously non-citizens could vote, and that was the law, that we had to allow non-citizens to vote. It wasn't like we had a choice of an option to let non-citizens vote. We had to let them vote as a condition of our statehood, right?
That was over 100 years ago.
Yeah,
though.
We've gone so far the other way now that everyone just takes it for granted that, well, if you're not a citizen, why would you be able to vote? That doesn't make any sense. But the rule was actually, back in like 1848, in 1847, I guess, when they passed the ordinance.
So nearly 200 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it was, of course you're going to let foreign citizens in your state vote in the federal elections for president, right? That's just how it's got to be. And if you don't do that, then don't be a state. I mean, it sounds almost crazy now, but that's just how far we've come. I think people just take a lot of things for granted, and if you look at like the broad scope of history and geography and all the different ways that things have been, a lot of things that we take for granted just shouldn't be taken for granted. You should open them up and consider all these different things. And the thing is, the conservative crazy people are doing that, and they're considering all sorts of crazy options that weren't even on the radar.
Birthright citizenship. I mean, we just saw a blatantly unconstitutional executive order try to nullify the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, that is scary.
Well, which they're basically.
Well, I just think it's absurd. I think it's part of when we started talking about this. It's the he does outlandish things. And we'll move on to another one quickly because it just kind of it's the old man of action, right? The Nietzschean concept of this will to power, and they really like this. People are drawn to that kind of the strong man.
And it's part of the anti-intellectualism too. We don't believe men of ideas; we believe men of actions, right?
Yes.
And no one is better situated in this world to be a strong anti-intellectual than Donald J. Trump. He has that going for him really strong.
I am concerned, and I'll bring this up again, about the potential for students who are students not from U.S. parents, but from immigrant parents, and they may be immigrants too, and that they may be dragged out of classes. and
well, I mean, and I mean, and
taken to detention.
I mean, I know people who are like absolutely citizens, lived here their entire life, parents been citizens, their parents were citizens, no real question about their citizenship at all, but who are like where do I get my birth certificate now, just in case, right?
Right,
You know, and it's like, well, you know, according to
people get caught up in those
your birth certificate may not save you, right? You know, who cares if you were born here, right? That, you know, it's like, what do you need to prove now, right? You know, it's but I mean,
I just sent you the.
I have my passport. You know, I'm good. I'm good. That'll allow me to save. It'll also allow me to leave. So
Go ahead.
I just sent you the MTA's position on all of this. You could take a look at what their position is on what has happened as a result of the what's going to be aggressive deportations of hundreds of thousands of people in this country, right? That is going to happen. We will see what kind of resistance there is to it. I'm not very. I'm not. If you've looked at the messaging, particularly from the Democratic Party, the resistance idea has fallen by the wayside. If you remember, there was hundreds of thousands of people in the streets after Trump was. That when people went to the airports and clogged the airports after the Muslim ban, we've seen none of that. We've seen none of that now, right? The Black Lives Matter and kind of peak identity politics stuff has sapped a lot of people, and there's a much different kind of view of things. And part of it is because Trump won again, you know, and so we will see how far they can go.
Of one teacher being suspended for a while now because she put out some papers that schools were supposed to give out, I guess, and she put them out, and her principal did not want them to be given out.
In Milwaukee?
In Milwaukee, yeah.
Well, if you can send me that information, I'd be interested in seeing what that's about.
Yeah, we're gonna have a lot of follow up once we, you know, get in front of a computer here. Let me. I mean, I really don't know what's going to happen with a lot of this stuff because a lot of this stuff is just so crazy. You do see some. You see like inspector generals that were told to leave, saying, you know, no, we're not going to leave. You've seen, you know, like immediate lawsuits to block a bunch of this stuff because it is just so nutty. You've seen, you know, like people that were completely inside the Trump camp, like, you know, ruling class folks saying, wait, what did you just do? What did you just do? This is crazy. I mean, you know, it's like they're stopping all this stuff, and it's like, you know, it's just like this flurry of crazy actions all over the place. And a lot, I mean, I've read some of these executive orders that look like they were written like by I don't know, an 8-year-old lawyer, you know, like someone who doesn't understand anything but can like cite stuff. Maybe they're using ChatGPT or something to write all these things. I don't know. You know, you would think that they would make more sense because they had a year to put them all together, and some of them look like.
That's the dominant narrative now, that they really know what they're doing now. But
yeah, I mean, I mean, my impression is that I mean, there's the one that tries to define that there is two sexes. It's just so ignorant of biology, right? I mean, it's you know, if you are someone who is genetically male and therefore has the immutable trait that creates the small reproductive cell, right, according to their thing, but you never get that gene activated, and you wind up being just an ordinary Juliet or Jennifer walking down the street who's 8 months pregnant. You know, the Trump executive order suddenly defines you as a male, right? It's like you've got all these women, right, that are walking around. Everyone knows they're women. They're biologically women. You know, they're like I say, you know, they get pregnant. They're doing all the women stuff. They've got, you know, they're heterosexual. They have husbands, and like suddenly, like Trump has defined them all as men. It's just nutty, right?
No,
Because no one, and I mean, although other people have a different interpretation where he's like, no, he's just defined everyone in the country as a woman, including himself. Which is not how I read the order, but it is so biologically illiterate, right? Like you have like medical professionals and experts and just like ordinary people that know a little bit of human biology coming and saying, "What this makes no sense. I don't even know how to read this. This makes just nonsense," right? And so many of the things that are coming out of the White House just look like that, and it's just like, there's just going to be like, this is going to go in front of a court, and the court is going to try to figure out what this even is supposed to mean,
Right. Well,
and then it's going to decide whether it's legal or not, right? But first you have to figure out like, what is this nonsense? Who wrote this thing?
Two things come to mind. One is the steady erosion of the powers of the other branches, particularly of the legislative branch. You look at the Constitution. It's all about the legislative branch, right? The other two branches are
Article 1. Why is it number 1?
Exactly, right. And you see all these powers
to declare war.
The Supreme Court,
power of the purse.
The Supreme Court, by the way, is just a creation of whatever the legislative branch wants it to be. So anyway, every time we have a war, which is every 6 years when I was growing up, but from the beginning of the Republic, it was a constant state of imperial incursions, north, south, east, and west, and that power was ceded to the executive branch over and over and over and over again. And we and liberals have gone along with this too, and have looked at the expansion of federal power, right, national power also, as the savior, right? We've had that battle between states and the national government, and this is the problem with depending on very legalistic and top-down political movements to try to solve all of your problems. Because if you look at the history of the Supreme Court, it was always a reactionary institution. The only time it wasn't was when after FDR started to put people into power, and then we had kind of a liberal run there of the New Deal order.
He got to hang around and appoint 8 justices out of 9, right? So it's like,
and then that is gone. Mm-hmm. So now, where are you if you haven't built the institutions and the population who believes in those kinds of democratic ideals?
Right. I mean, it's like so much of what's actually been successful has been in the cultural realm and just changing people's thoughts and people advancing and becoming more enlightened on things. Anyhow, we've got like 20 seconds before they're going to cut us off here.
Oh, wow.
So, we went through
that was a quick hour.
Yeah. So anyhow, that was Chris Fons. He's running unopposed for school board, and we like to talk with him and all.
You can see that he is by the way he talks.
Yeah. All right, that's it. Bye.
You see it.
His voice to get drowned out by all the chatter out there these days.